Hello everyone, it's daytime! You can call me Buster, and in this video, I'll be giving you a crash course on Days of Ruin's mechanics. This video is mainly aimed at current Advance Wars by web players who may be interested in learning how to play Days of Ruin PvP using Tiny Wars. This info is also generally useful for playing the original DS game. This video should have chapters that will allow you to quickly skip to different sections. For the record, this video will not be going into detail explaining any given unit, CO, terrain, etc. Instead, I'll focus on units and mechanics which have been buffed, nerfed, or otherwise changed in some way, and I'll give a brief summary of any new units or mechanics. I'll flash every unit's damage chart on screen, so if you're interested in checking any particular matchup, feel free to pause the video and take a look. Alright, let's get started. First, we'll take a look at returning units. I'll be judging them as either buffed, nerfed, rebalanced, or unchanged. Let's go down the list. Infantry. Nerfed. They now cost 1500 instead of 1000, making them less spammable. Mech. Buffed. It now costs 2500 instead of 3000, making them more easy to use. Recon. Pretty much unchanged. Here's the damage chart for reference. Anti-air. Rebalanced. It now costs 7,000 down from 8,000. However, it only has 6 ammo instead of 9, and a lot of matchups have been changed, most notably against tanks and battlecopters. Tank. Mostly unchanged. Now has 6 ammo instead of 9, and notably has a better matchup against medium tanks. Speaking of medium tanks, they're rebalanced. They now cost 12,000 down from 16,000, and have only 5 ammo instead of 8, and are overall weaker, no longer having any one-shot potential without a firepower boost. Artillery. Slightly buffed. It's down to 6 ammo from 9, but now has 3 vision in Fog of War, meaning it doesn't require vision from other units to fire. Rockets. Slightly nerfed. It's down to 5 ammo from 6, and overall does very slightly less damage to most units. Still very useful, and you should hardly notice the difference. Missiles. Buffed. They now have 5 move instead of 4, have 3 to 6 range instead of 3 to 5, and haven't been nerfed at all in terms of damage. They are down to 5 ammo from 6 though, and missiles remain a very situational unit. APC. Buffed. In Days of Ruin, they've been renamed to Rigs. Don't ask me why they renamed them. Anyway, they retain their role as a supply and transport unit, but they now have 99 fuel up from 50, and they can build 2 new types of terrain. It can build temporary airports on plains, and temporary seaports on beaches. However, it can only do this once, even if resupplied on an allied building. We'll talk about those 2 new buildings in the terrain section of this video. Fighter. Rebalanced. Like with many units, they're down to 6 ammo from 9, but they now have a whopping 5 vision in Fog. They no longer do as much damage to bombers, but are much more consistent at one-shotting copter units. Bomber. Slightly buffed. Now costs 20,000 down from 22,000, has 6 ammo down from 9, and has 3 vision up from 2. Notably a bit less effective against anti-air and far less effective against cruisers. Battlecopter. Rebalanced. They now have 2 vision down from 3. The most notable changes to its matchups are the tank, anti-air, and cruiser. They also no longer have a chance to one-shot T-copters without a firepower boost. T-copters. Mostly unchanged. They now only have 1 vision down from 2, and they also enjoy the small benefit of no longer being randomly killed in one shot by battlecopters. Battleship. Heavily buffed and reworked. It now costs 25,000 down from 28,000, and has 3 vision up from 2. It has only 6 ammo instead of 9, and is now 3 to 5 range instead of 2 to 6. And it also does significantly less damage to most units. However, the battleship has the distinction of being the only indirect unit in the game which can move and then shoot in the same turn. This results in a much larger effective range, and it can still 2-shot most units. Carrier. Buffed and rebalanced. It now costs 28,000 instead of 30,000, and it's been changed into a direct attacking unit with infinite ammo. However, it does significantly less damage to air units, as the carrier now has a new gimmick. Once per turn, the carrier can forego its move to build a new unit, the seaplane, at the cost of 15,000 funds, which can then be launched on the next turn. Like the rig, this costs materials, of which the carrier can hold up to 4. The carrier can also load up to 2 air units, not just seaplanes, and will repair and resupply those units at the beginning of the turn. Submarine. Buffed. It now has 6 movement up from 5, and 70 fuel up from 60. It now does significantly more damage to battleships and carriers while being slightly less effective against cruisers. Like the battlecopter and T-copter, subs no longer have a chance at one-shotting landers without a firepower boost. And, most notably, subs will now be dived by default when built. Cruisers. Buffed. It now costs 16,000 down from 18,000 and has 5 vision up from 3. It can now one-shot any air unit in the game and can also attack any naval unit for a bit of damage. Like before, it still has the ability to load and transport up to 2 copter units. Lander. Unchanged. Similar to other transport units, the Lander enjoys the small benefit of no longer being randomly killed in one shot by subs. That covers all of the returning units. Also, fun fact before we continue, did you know that over 90% of my viewers aren't subscribed? I'm aiming to hit the big 1K by the end of the year, so why not consider becoming an S-rank viewer? Get it? S-rank because you're subscribed? Anyway. Some units from previous games didn't make it into Days of Ruin. These include the Black Boat, Black Bomb, Mega Tank, Neo Tank, Pipe Runner, and Stealth. Oh, and the Uzium. But we don't talk about the Uzium. Next, let's talk about the new units introduced in Days of Ruin. First off is the Bike. The Bike is an infantry-type unit capable of capturing properties, but it's much faster at 5 movement. However, it moves using TireB, so it gets slowed down a lot by heavy terrain. Bikes are extremely valuable in the capture game, and they deal the same amount of damage to units as a mech does when using the machine gun. Next, we have the Flare. This is a unit made for Fog of War. It's slightly more expensive than a Recon, and slightly stronger too. The main usage of the Flare, though, is to gain vision remotely. Shoot a flare, and any tiles within its range, even hiding spots, will be illuminated for the rest of the turn. Remember to use these before moving the rest of your army. Next is the War Tank. The War Tank is kind of like a hybrid between the Neo Tank and the Mega Tank. It's incredibly powerful and costs the same amount as a medium tank does in Advance Wars by Web. But with only 4 movement points, it becomes pretty situational. Next is perhaps the most unique new unit, the Anti-Tank. This is an indirect unit similar to the artillery, but it has 1 to 3 range. This means it can shoot at close range, and it will even counterattack if engaged in direct combat. It has a ton of defense and dishes out major damage to vehicles. It can even attack copters, and it trades well against them. The Anti-Tank is not without its issues, however. With only 4 move and on TireB, it can be a struggle to get into position, and bikes are actually capable of taking cost-effective engagements against it. And at nearly double the price of an artillery, it can be pretty hard to justify building it. Still, the Anti-Tank is very strong, and always demands an answer when built. Next is the Duster. This is an air unit that falls somewhere between the battlecopter and the fighter, both in terms of price and power. However, the Duster only has a machine gun, so it's only really capable of damaging foot soldiers and other air units. But with 8 movement and 4 vision, it can chase down enemy battlecopters without fear of a counterattack, and it can be an excellent scout in Fog of War. The Seaplane is unique in that it can only be built by another unit, the Carrier. Seaplanes hit hard and fast, being the only unit able to attack every other unit in the game. Their biggest drawback is having only 40 fuel and 3 ammo, meaning they can't stay on the front line for long. They work best when darting in, attacking, and then retreating to the carrier for supplies. On top of that, paying 28k for a carrier and then another 15k on top of that is a very large investment just to get a seaplane, so you'll almost never see these being built. Still, some maps include pre-deployed carriers, which make seaplanes a lot more viable. Last but not least, we have the gunboat. This is somewhat of a successor to the black boat, being a cheap ship capable of transporting a single infantry or mech unit. However, instead of being able to repair units, the gunboat has one single shot that it can use to attack or defend itself with, and it's quite strong against other ships. Of course, with only one ammo, they usually won't be killing anything, but since they're cheap and strong, simply spamming a few gunboats can be an effective counter to enemy naval units. Those are all the new units, but first, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room, TireB. In older games, there was only one type of tire, which has been relabeled to TireA in Days of Ruin. TireB is a brand new movement type, and only the bike and the anti-tank use it. TireB is notably not slowed down on plains or ruins, but everything else is the same as TireA. Next, I want to quickly note a very important change: the damage calculation. In previous games, the damage calculation heavily prioritized defense over firepower, meaning that with enough defense, units would become virtually indestructible. In Days of Ruin, defense is no longer as powerful, and it can be effectively counteracted by firepower boosts. The full formula is on screen, and as you can clearly see, explaining this in depth would require its own dedicated video. So the most important thing to take away from this is that defense stars will not protect you as well as you may be used to. Heck, the CO Wayland gets an extra 300 defense when he uses his power, and even then, a full HP anti-air does around 25% to his battlecopters. Next, let's talk terrain. First, I'll cover old terrain types that have been updated, followed by explaining the new terrain. Shoals. These have been renamed to beaches. They now require 2 movement points for both TireA and TireB units. Bridges. If built over the sea, naval units can now pass through them. If on beach, which is a feature exclusive to Tiny Wars, only gunboats and landers can move onto them. Forests. These have been renamed woods, and now give 3 defense instead of 2. Reefs. Now give 2 defense instead of 1. Silo and empty silo. Now gives 2 defense instead of 3. Cities. Now only give 2 defense instead of 3. Comm towers. These now provide a 5% bonus to both firepower and defense per tower. This effectively means that opposing towers cancel each other out. They also now provide income like other properties. On top of these changes, all properties now act as hiding spots in Fog of War, and when captured, they also have a vision range of 2 for that player only. Airports also act as hiding spots for air units. And now, onto the new terrain. First is the Wasteland. It gives middling defense of 2 stars and slows down every ground unit in the game except for foot soldiers. Tires are especially affected by this. Ruins are identical to plains, except that they act as hiding spots. This is unfortunate for TireA. The Fire is an impassable, indestructible tile which provides 5 vision globally in Fog of War. This vision does not include hiding places. Rough Sea is a new type of defensive terrain for naval units which also slows them down somewhat. Mist is a hiding spot which provides an additional 1 defense star. In the original game, this was limited to sea tiles, but in Tiny Wars, this has been expanded to some other tiles, including plains. In this case, its defense will stack with the terrain it's on, and it will also hide ground units. For example, Mist on plains provides 2 defense stars. Mist does not hide air units. The Radar is a new building which provides 3 defense stars and also provides income. It further provides 5 vision in Fog of War when captured, making it the only building to not have 2 vision. The Temporary Airport is one of 2 buildings that can be built by rigs. It can only be built on a plains tile. Like all buildings, it acts as a hiding spot for ground units, but can also hide air units. When owned by a player, it provides 2 vision and will also repair and resupply allied air units. However, new units cannot be deployed from the tile. The Temporary Seaport is the other building which the rig can build. It can only be built on beach tiles. Like all buildings, it is a hiding spot for ground units, but it can also hide naval units. When owned by a player, it provides 2 vision and will also repair and resupply allied naval units. However, new units cannot be deployed from this tile. The Meteor is the successor to the Pipe Seam. This is an impassable tile, but it can be destroyed. It has 99 health. Refer to the damage chart on screen for the base damage values. If the Meteor is like the Pipe Seam, then Plasma is like the regular pipe. This tile is impassable and indestructible. However, Plasma will attach to any adjacent meteor tiles, and when any one of those meteors is destroyed, all of the plasma connected to it will be destroyed as well, no matter how far away the connected plasma reaches. Super Plasma is a new type of plasma introduced in Tiny Wars. It is the same as regular plasma, except that it is not destroyed when nearby meteors are destroyed. This allows mappers to use it in conjunction with meteors to recreate the pipe and pipe seam behavior of previous games. Everything else on this list is commonly used exclusively for co-op or war room maps, and players should rarely, if ever, encounter these in PvP. At least at the time of this writing. You never know what the future holds. That's all for terrain. Next on the list is the Unit Promotion System. Units which kill an enemy unit will gain 1 level, up to a maximum of 3. At level 1, the unit gains an extra 5% firepower. At level 2, this becomes a 10% firepower bonus. And at level 3, also called Veteran rank, the unit gains a 20% bonus to both its firepower and its defense. This is the highest possible promotion a unit can get, achieved after having killed 3 units. Note that if you damage an enemy with a first unit, and then destroy that enemy with a second unit, only the unit that scores the final kill will gain the promotion. Next, let's go over changes to weather. There are 3 weather conditions in Days of Ruin, and they've all been changed compared to the previous games, so let's take a look at them in order. First is rain. During rain, Fog of War is forced, even during a standard game. All units have their vision reduced to 1, while buildings will no longer have any vision at all. Next is snow. In snowy weather, all units have their movement reduced by 1. There are no additional effects beyond that. Finally, there's sandstorm. During a sandstorm, all units will suffer a 30% reduction to firepower. And now, here comes a big one! How do CO powers work in Days of Ruin? Well, unlike previous games, COs no longer have global day-to-day powers. Instead, COs must be loaded into a unit. This can be done at the appropriate production tile, such as a factory for ground units, or on your own HQ. To load your CO into a unit, it must start its turn on the correct tile. Then you select the CO option without moving the unit. This costs half of the unit's value. For example, a tank costs 3,500 funds to load. Once loaded, you will now get a CO zone centered around your unit. The size of the CO zone is determined by your CO's individual zone radius, and it includes the tile that the CO unit itself is on. Your CO unit will also be instantly promoted to Veteran rank, giving it a further 20% bonus to firepower and defense. This stacks with your CO zone bonus. The zone also provides a passive 10% boost to firepower and defense, which all COs get. Charging your CO power has also been majorly overhauled. Instead of all attacks contributing towards power charge, now only units which attack from inside of the CO zone provide energy. Engagements outside of any CO zone do not provide energy for either player. And instead of being based on unit value, energy charge is based purely on raw damage dealt. Each point of damage done equals 1 point of energy charge. This means that killing an enemy unit from inside of the CO zone in 1 shot will provide 10 energy. It doesn't matter if it was an infantry or a bomber. The only thing that matters is damage dealt. Upon reaching 30 energy, or half of the power meter, the CO zone's radius will increase by 1, making it larger. Upon reaching 60 energy, the zone radius will increase again to 2 extra tiles, and you will now have the ability to trigger your CO power. However, if your CO unit is killed, your energy charge will be reset to 0, and you won't be able to load your CO into another unit until the start of your next turn. COs in Days of Ruin have only 1 CO power, with 2 exceptions, which can be used upon collecting 60 energy. Instead of being activated from a menu, CO powers are triggered as an action on the CO unit itself. This means that the CO unit cannot have moved or taken an action to activate the power. When using your CO power, your day-to-day CO zone will become global until the beginning of your next turn, on top of the effects of your CO power. Your power will end at the beginning of your next turn, resetting your CO zone back to its original size. However, if your CO unit is killed during your CO power, your power will immediately end. I mentioned earlier that every CO has one CO power, with two exceptions. These are Forsyth and Calder, who both have no CO power. This has the side effect that they cannot gain any energy charge, and therefore cannot increase the size of their CO zones. Finally, in regards to Tiny Wars, I want to make two things clear. First, Calder has been nerfed so that he can be played alongside the other COs. Second, Tiny Wars also has a number of custom COs, many of which operate outside of the rules outlined above. For example, by having different load costs, or having both a power and a superpower. Be aware that if you play as or against one of these custom characters, that they may not act in the way other COs do. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear me cover these COs in a future video. Finally, let's go over my personal favorite change, and one of the biggest changes from Advance Wars by Web: Fog of War. Fog works the same as previous games for the most part, but the way in which units interact with it has been completely rewritten. First, as previously stated in the terrain section, all buildings now act as hiding spots. Furthermore, once a building comes under your control, it provides 2 vision, with exception to the radar. This can make it much tougher to take an enemy city, since you need to gain vision on it first to see if there's an enemy unit hiding there. However, there is a solution to this problem: recon sweeps. In Days of Ruin, units now gain vision from every tile they move through, including adjacent hiding spots. This means that a unit moving past a hiding spot will gain vision on that tile, even if it doesn't end up next to it after moving. All of those tiles will then remain visible until the end of your turn, even if the unit that gave you that vision dies, for example to a counterattack. It is also now a possibility to utilize the flare unit to gain vision on remote tiles, which allows you to avoid wasting another unit's turn by having to scout with it. A substantial amount of units have had their vision ranges changed in Days of Ruin. For example, the artillery now having 3 vision and the battlecopter now only having 2. So if you're an existing Advance Wars by Web player and you decide to try a Days of Ruin fog game, check your vision ranges often, because it will most likely be different from what you expected. It is important to note that in Fog of War, your opponent's CO zone will only be visible to you if you have vision on the enemy CO unit. This means that it's possible to attack an enemy unit that's getting a boost from the zone, but you might not actually know that the zone is there. In this case, the damage preview will not take this into account, and you may end up doing less damage than you expected. This can be useful to figure out if the enemy CO unit is nearby, as well as letting you guess at where it might be hiding. Whew. Alright, that's about everything. There are still a lot of things I'd like to mention, for example simulation mode, which is kind of like Tiny Wars' version of the move planner, but to be perfectly honest, this video has already quickly spiraled out of control in terms of scope, so I'll leave it there for now. Keep an eye on my channel for future replay commentaries, war room playthroughs, and my specialty, micromap showcases. You should subscribe because, in my humble opinion, I am definitely one of the YouTubers of all time. But until next time, goodbye everyone, it's nighttime.